Parents and two kids vanished on a fall drive. 36 years later, his family is found underground. Mark Miller was a hardworking man, steady and kind, who spent most of his days at a local factory. His wife, Linda, was a gentle woman with a warm smile, always making sure their home was full of love and laughter. They had two children, Emily, their bright and cheerful 11-year-old daughter, and Ryan, a curious 8-year-old boy who loved asking questions about everything he saw. Together, they seemed like the perfect family. People in the town often admired the way they spent time together, whether it was playing in the park, going to local fairs, or simply sharing quiet evenings at home. It was a crisp autumn morning when the Millers decided to take a drive to visit Linda's parents, who lived about 2 hours away. The trees along the road were dressed in shades of red, orange, and gold. Leaves crunched under the tires as they drove, and the air smelled fresh and cool. The children were excited. Emily had packed a small bag with books to read in the car, and Ryan kept pointing out squirrels and birds along the road. Mark and Linda laughed as Ryan insisted that every squirrel was the fastest in the world, and Emily teased him for exaggerating. They started their journey with smiles and chatter, stopping briefly at a small diner for breakfast. The smell of fresh pancakes and coffee filled the air, and the children laughed as they tried to pick the biggest pancakes. After a short meal, they got back into their car, waved goodbye to the friendly waitress, and continued down the winding road surrounded by forests and small hills. The weather was calm, and the sun cast a golden glow over the landscape. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The children sang along to songs on the radio, Mark hummed quietly, and Linda gazed out the window, feeling peaceful. It was just another ordinary weekend, and no one could have imagined how quickly everything would change. As the family drove further, the road became narrower, and the trees on either side grew taller and thicker. The car passed through quiet areas where no houses were visible, only the occasional abandoned barn or farm. It was in one of these stretches of road that the first unusual thing happened. A car passed them too quickly, weaving slightly, before disappearing around a bend. Mark didn't think much of it at the time, assuming the driver was just in a hurry. But in that moment, something small yet strange brushed against the back of their minds, an uneasy feeling that would grow stronger with each passing hour. A short while later, the Millers noticed that the road ahead had a fallen tree partially blocking the path. Mark slowed down carefully, maneuvering around it. As he drove past, he glanced at the trees on the side of the road, noticing shadows that seemed to move strangely, even though the wind was calm. Linda tried to brush it off, telling herself that it was just the sunlight and the branches creating odd shapes. The children, unaware of the tension, continued playing quietly in the back seat. By late morning, the family reached a small town that was supposed to be a brief stop on their journey. Mark parked near a convenience store to get a map and double-check their route. Linda stepped out to stretch her legs while Emily and Ryan ran around the parking lot, laughing as they played a game of tag. Mark returned with the map and noticed a small, handwritten note in the window of the store that read, "Road ahead closed, use alternate route." He frowned, realizing that their usual route was blocked, and quickly pointed out a detour on the map. Linda agreed, and they set off down a less familiar road, trusting that the drive would still be safe. The detour led them through even narrower roads and deeper into the countryside. The trees grew closer together, and the forest seemed quieter than usual. Birds rarely chirped, and the wind made soft, rustling sounds that echoed oddly in the dense woods. The children began to notice the quietness and asked their parents why it was so silent. Linda told them that sometimes the forest was just peaceful, but Mark felt a growing sense of unease. He drove cautiously, checking mirrors and looking around constantly. Hours passed, and the Millers still hadn't reached Linda's parents' house. They stopped at a small gas station to fill up, but even there the attendant seemed distant, as if something about the road ahead made people nervous. Mark paid for the fuel, and Linda tried to reassure herself and the children that everything was fine. She suggested they stop for a small snack before continuing, hoping to lighten the mood. The children happily agreed, and they sat for a while eating sandwiches and juice. After the break, they got back into the car and resumed their journey. The detour road twisted and turned, going through dense forests and occasionally opening into small clearings. By mid-afternoon, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. The children grew tired, and Emily leaned against the window, reading her book while Ryan rested his head on his mother's shoulder. The peacefulness of the ride returned for a short while, as if the tension from earlier had disappeared. Then, without warning, the car hit a patch of fog that seemed unusually thick for that time of year. Visibility dropped, and the outlines of trees and signs became blurred. Mark slowed down, turning on the headlights, but the fog seemed to wrap around them like a wall. He suggested pulling over for a moment until the fog cleared, but just as he looked for a safe spot, the car suddenly jerked, as if hitting something, though the road looked clear. The children squealed in surprise, and Linda grabbed Mark's arm. Mark stopped the car, checked the tires, and looked around, but there was no sign of anything unusual. Still, a creeping sense of worry took hold. The fog made the road look unfamiliar, and the usual landmarks that Mark remembered were nowhere in sight. Linda tried to comfort the children, explaining that sometimes fog could make roads look different. Emily and Ryan, trusting their parents, didn't panic, though they both felt a little nervous. They continued slowly, with Mark keeping his eyes on the road and mirrors constantly. The detour had led them further into isolated areas, with no houses or people in sight. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as the fog thickened in patches and the trees grew denser. The children began to ask when they would reach their grandparents' house, and Linda, trying to remain cheerful, said it would only be a little longer. By evening, the car finally emerged from the fog, but the forested road ahead seemed even quieter and emptier. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, but it did little to ease the growing tension inside the car. The family's cheerful mood from the morning had shifted into a quiet unease. Mark suggested they take one last small break before finding a place to stay for the night. They pulled over near a small clearing and stepped out of the car to stretch. The children played for a few minutes in the fading light, running and laughing as if trying to chase away the sense of worry. Linda looked around, noticing how empty the area was and how the trees seemed to form a wall around them. She shivered slightly and called the children back to the car. Mark, too, felt the unease settling deeper, but he told himself that it was just the isolation and fading light making things seem stranger than they were. They got back into the car and continued down the road, determined to reach a safe place before darkness fell. But as they drove, something inexplicable happened. They reached a curve where the road seemed to vanish, swallowed by the shadows of the forest. The headlights illuminated only a narrow path ahead, and for the first time, Mark realized that he couldn't remember seeing this stretch of road before. A sense of confusion and fear began to build. Emily asked if they were lost, and Linda gently said, "No, sweetie. We're just on a different path. It's okay." Ryan remained silent, sensing the tension but too young to fully understand it. Mark gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing as he tried to recall the route, but nothing looked familiar. Every turn seemed to lead deeper into the unknown forest, and soon the car was enveloped in darkness, with only the dim glow of the headlights cutting through the shadows. And then, as the night settled in and the trees loomed overhead, the Miller family vanished. There were no sounds of struggle, no crash, no sign that anything unusual had happened. The car and the family simply disappeared from the road that had been their familiar path just hours before. Back in town, when the Millers failed to arrive at their grandparents' house, panic began to spread. Friends, neighbors, and relatives called, searched, and alerted the authorities. Hours turned into days and days into weeks, but no one could find a trace of the family. It was as if they had been swallowed by the earth itself, leaving behind only the memory of a sunny autumn morning and the echoes of laughter that would never be heard again. The disappearance of the Miller family became one of the town's deepest mysteries, a story whispered in hushed tones and remembered by everyone who knew them. Even decades later, people would recall the day the family left for a simple fall drive and never returned, wondering what had happened on that quiet, golden road. After the Miller family vanished that autumn day, the small town was shaken to its core. At first, everyone believed it might be a simple misunderstanding or a minor accident. Perhaps the family had gotten lost and would eventually return. But as hours stretched into days, the worry grew heavier. Friends, neighbors, and relatives joined in the search, combing the roads, forests, and nearby towns, calling out for Mark, Linda, Emily, and Ryan. The local authorities were called in immediately, and a full-scale search began, but the results were nothing short of baffling. There was no sign of the car, no footprints, no evidence of an accident, and no indication that the family had chosen to leave on their own. Detective Henry Lawson, one of the most experienced officers in the town, took charge of the investigation. He had seen missing person cases before, but the complete disappearance of a family without a trace was rare and troubling. He interviewed friends and neighbors, gathering information about the Millers, habits, routines, and relationships. Everyone spoke only in praise, describing Mark as dependable and calm, Linda as caring and thoughtful, and the children as kind, bright, and cheerful. No one could imagine why anyone would want to harm them. Still, Detective Lawson kept an open mind, knowing that even the most ordinary cases could hide extraordinary circumstances. The first few weeks were full of leads that ultimately led nowhere. Some people claimed to have seen a car matching the Millers near a neighboring county, but these sightings were never confirmed. Others suggested that perhaps the family had met with an accident in the forested roads they had taken, but search teams found no wreckage or evidence. Every search, no matter how thorough, ended in disappointment. Each failed lead weighed heavily on the townspeople and law enforcement alike, creating a sense of helplessness that lingered over the community like a dark cloud. Among those most affected by the disappearance was Mark's younger brother, Tom Miller. Unlike the others who slowly tried to return to their normal lives, Tom could not let go. He spent every day reviewing maps, retracing the roads the family had taken, and talking to anyone who might have information. His obsession grew, sometimes worrying his own family and friends, but he refused to stop. Every detail mattered, no matter how small: a road sign, a passing car, a memory from years ago. Tom knew that if he gave up, he might never know what had happened to his brother and his family. Months passed, and the initial urgency of the case faded from national headlines, but not from the hearts of those closest to the Millers. Detective Lawson continued to monitor tips and leads, and local volunteers conducted small searches when possible. Each new tip sparked hope, only to be crushed when it led to nothing. Some leads came from as far as other states, strangers reaching out after hearing about the case through news stories or community networks. Others came from locals who remembered odd incidents or unusual people near the forested roads at the time of the disappearance. Despite all the efforts, the mystery only deepened, leaving everyone frustrated and heartbroken. As years passed, new technology slowly became available, offering a glimmer of hope in a case that had seemed hopeless. Ground-penetrating radar, advanced mapping systems, and DNA testing provided tools that law enforcement officers of the 1980s and 1990s could only dream about. Detective Lawson, who had retired but remained invested in the case, suggested that these technologies be used to re-examine the areas where the Millers had been last seen. Even after decades, he believed it was still possible to uncover clues that had been missed in the initial search. Meanwhile, Tom Miller never stopped searching. He studied maps, comparing old photographs and road plans to new satellite images. He interviewed anyone who might remember something unusual from that day, from gas station attendants to travelers passing through. Sometimes he would follow rumors that seemed unlikely, yet he knew that even the smallest detail could lead to a breakthrough. His persistence became almost legendary in the town, inspiring others to help and showing that hope could endure even in the darkest times. Over the years, the story of the Miller family spread beyond the town, reaching newspapers and television shows across the country. True crime enthusiasts and amateur detectives took interest in the case, analyzing every detail, theorizing about possible scenarios, and sharing ideas online. Some suggested that the family might have been kidnapped, while others believed it was an accident that left them hidden somewhere deep in the forest. While many of these theories were far-fetched, they kept the memory of the family alive and reminded people that the search had never truly ended. Detective Lawson also encouraged a team of younger officers to look at the case with fresh eyes. They brought new methods, such as analyzing old photographs with modern imaging tools and reviewing decades-old police reports for overlooked details. They revisited witness statements, sometimes uncovering minor inconsistencies or forgotten observations that hinted at what might have happened. Every small discovery, even a tiny piece of evidence, felt monumental after so many years of dead ends. Tom's dedication also led him to form connections with other families experiencing similar disappearances. He joined support groups, exchanged notes, and offered advice to those struggling to find closure. In helping others, he also gained insights that he applied to his own search. One important lesson he learned was that even small leads could be critical, and patience was essential. A single overlooked clue could make the difference between decades of uncertainty and finally discovering the truth. Time passed, but the town never forgot the Millers. Memorials were placed in their honor, and each year, community members would light candles or plant flowers in remembrance. Schools taught children about the family in a way that emphasized the importance of caring for one another, remembering loved ones, and never giving up hope. The story of the Millers became part of the town's history, a reminder of both loss and the enduring human spirit. Despite the passage of time, Tom refused to let technology or distance slow him down. He continued to study aerial photographs, noting areas that had been missed by search teams decades ago. He analyzed the paths they might have taken, taking into account the weather conditions and the roads that were closed or under construction at the time. He even spoke with construction workers, historians, and long-time residents to learn about changes in the landscape that might reveal hidden locations. Every detail, no matter how small, became a vital part of his relentless pursuit of answers. The breakthrough finally came when a local farmer remembered something unusual about the property near the forest where the Millers had been last seen. 36 years earlier, he had noticed that the land had been disturbed in a strange way, as if someone had been digging. At the time, he had dismissed it, thinking it was nothing important. But recalling the disappearance of the Miller family, he contacted the authorities with this information. Though decades had passed, the memory was clear enough to prompt a new investigation. With modern tools like ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation techniques, search teams began examining the property. This time, they were not relying solely on eyewitness accounts or vague rumors. They had the advantage of technology, experience, and decades of accumulated knowledge about the family's last known movements. The discovery of unusual structures beneath the earth made it clear that something significant might be hidden underground, reigniting hope in a way that had seemed impossible for years. For Tom, the renewed search was emotional. He remembered the day the family disappeared in vivid detail: the crunch of leaves under the tires, the laughter of the children, the golden sunlight filtering through the trees. Seeing the search teams at the property brought a mix of hope, fear, and anticipation. Could it really be true after all these years? Could the decades of searching finally reveal the fate of his brother, sister-in-law, and young niece and nephew? As the excavation began, the entire town followed closely. People who had once prayed in silence were now involved, watching, waiting, and hoping. Families lit candles and gathered in small groups near the site, holding hands and offering silent prayers. The story that had haunted them for decades was finally approaching a turning point, and every shovel of earth removed carried with it the weight of 36 years of mystery, grief, and unanswered questions. The investigation during this period also focused on analyzing the possible motives and scenarios that could have led to the disappearance. While decades had passed, detectives used modern forensic methods to test soil, study vegetation patterns, and examine historical records. Every piece of information, no matter how minor, became a potential key to unlocking the truth. Even objects once considered irrelevant were re-examined under a new lens, with the benefit of scientific tools that had not existed in the 1980s. Throughout all of this, the town's sense of community strengthened. Volunteers worked tirelessly alongside authorities, offering meals, drinks, and comfort to the search teams. Local businesses donated supplies and equipment, and people shared memories of the Millers to remind everyone why the search mattered. The story became more than a mystery. It became a shared mission, uniting generations in hope and determination. Even as the search progressed, the emotional impact on Tom and other family members was profound. Each new lead brought excitement and fear in equal measure. They had waited decades for answers, and now that hope was tangible, it was almost overwhelming. Tom often found himself reflecting on the years of searching, the sleepless nights, and the moments of despair when it seemed as if the family would never be found. And yet, he never gave up, demonstrating the resilience and dedication that had carried him through every obstacle. By the end of this stage of the investigation, the stage was set for a shocking revelation. The search teams had gathered compelling evidence suggesting that the Millers were hidden somewhere on the property. While they could not yet see the full truth, the clues pointed toward a discovery that would change everything. The town, the family, and even the authorities realized that after 36 long years, they were on the verge of finally learning what had happened to the missing family. The search for the Miller family, once a story of despair and frustration, had transformed into a tale of hope, determination, and relentless human spirit. The combination of modern technology, careful investigation, and the unwavering dedication of Tom Miller and the community brought them closer than ever to answers that had seemed impossible for decades. The mystery that had haunted a small town for more than 3 decades was finally beginning to unravel, setting the stage for a shocking and emotional discovery that no one would forget. After decades of searching and hoping, the Miller family's case had reached a turning point. The tip from the local farmer had given the authorities a specific location to investigate, and modern technology made it possible to explore areas that had been unreachable in the past. Ground-penetrating radar revealed strange anomalies beneath the surface, shapes that suggested a hidden underground space. It was an astonishing development, one that no one had dared to imagine for 36 years. The entire town was electrified with anticipation, unsure what they would find, yet hoping for some closure at last. Tom Miller, who had dedicated his life to finding his missing family, was at the site, standing close to the excavation area. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. For decades, he had replayed the events of that fateful day in his mind. The leaves crunching under the car tires, the laughter of Emily and Ryan, the warmth of Linda's hand holding Mark's as they drove down the golden autumn road. Now all of those memories seemed closer than ever, as if the earth itself was about to reveal its long-hidden secret. The excavation began slowly and carefully. Every layer of soil removed was examined meticulously. Authorities had learned from years of experience that patience was essential. After so many years, the smallest piece of evidence could make all the difference. Volunteers and law enforcement officers worked side by side, removing earth with shovels, brushes, and other tools designed to prevent damage to anything that might be hidden beneath. The air was thick with tension, every movement deliberate, as if the ground itself held its breath. Hours passed, and the excavation revealed a small, narrow entrance partially covered by roots and overgrown vegetation. The team worked together to clear the way, careful not to disturb anything inside. The entrance led to a hidden underground space, long forgotten and concealed from the world above. When the first glimpse of the interior appeared, the reality of the discovery struck everyone like a wave. It was both shocking and heartbreaking, a moment that carried the weight of 36 years of unanswered questions. Inside the underground chamber, the remains of the Miller family were found. The conditions had preserved certain aspects of the space, making it possible for authorities to reconstruct what had happened. There was no indication of struggle, no signs of chaos. It was as if the family had been placed there carefully. The discovery was chilling, yet provided a clear answer to a question that had haunted so many for decades. The Millers had been hidden, kept in a place where no one had expected to look. The immediate reaction was a mixture of grief, relief, and disbelief. For Tom Miller, seeing the sight was almost overwhelming. He had spent years chasing leads, analyzing clues, and imagining countless scenarios about what might have happened. Now, the truth was finally in front of him. Tears filled his eyes as he stepped closer to the excavation, not fully able to comprehend the decades of mystery and pain that had led to this moment. Investigators quickly began documenting the site, taking photographs, collecting samples, and carefully noting the placement of every object. They worked meticulously, knowing that this evidence could finally explain the disappearance. Forensic experts were called in to analyze the remains and the surrounding area, hoping to uncover details that could reveal not only what happened to the Millers, but also why they had been hidden underground. Every step was performed with care, as the decades-long mystery required accuracy and patience to solve. As the investigation progressed, the team began piecing together the final moments of the Miller family. The underground space, although small, was constructed in a way that suggested it had been used deliberately to conceal the family. It was clear that this was not a random accident. Evidence pointed to the family being taken from the road and hidden, with care and planning, into a location that would remain secret for decades. Every detail, from the way the entrance was covered to the items found inside, added pieces to the puzzle that had remained unsolved for 36 years. The town followed the story with intense emotion. News crews gathered, capturing the solemn work of the excavation and the careful documentation of evidence. Residents, many of whom had grown up hearing about the Millers, watched as their decades-old mystery finally came to light. The discovery had a profound effect on the community, bringing back memories of the bright autumn day when the family disappeared and the uncertainty that had hung over the town ever since. For Tom Miller, the discovery was both a relief and a heartbreak. He finally had answers, but the realization of what had happened was devastating. The family he had loved and searched for all those years was gone. Still, there was a sense of closure that allowed him to process decades of grief. The long nights spent reviewing maps, speaking to witnesses, and chasing leads were not wasted. They had led him to the truth, even if it came much later than anyone could have imagined. Authorities continued to analyze the site for clues about who might have been responsible for hiding the family. They examined footprints, soil patterns, and the structure of the underground space. Every detail mattered, as the goal was not only to recover the Millers' remains, but also to understand the circumstances that led to their disappearance. Over time, patterns began to emerge, pointing investigators toward possible suspects and motives, and providing context for a case that had remained a mystery for more than 3 decades. Psychologists and grief counselors were also brought in to support the community and the family members. For those who had waited for answers for so long, the discovery was emotionally overwhelming. People were able to express their sorrow, their relief, and their memories, sharing stories about the Millers and the impact they had on the town. These moments were important, as they allowed the community to process the tragedy and honor the family in a meaningful way. Despite the shock, there was a remarkable sense of resilience in the town. Residents came together to support each other, remembering the Millers not just as victims, but as a family that had touched the lives of everyone around them. Memorials were organized at the excavation site, with flowers, letters, and photographs placed in tribute to Mark, Linda, Emily, and Ryan. The discovery, though tragic, inspired a sense of unity and shared humanity that helped people heal. The forensic analysis revealed even more details about the family's last moments. Investigators carefully reconstructed the timeline, showing how the Millers had been traveling down the detour road, likely encountering the person or persons responsible for hiding them. While the specifics of how they were taken remained under investigation, the evidence confirmed that the family had been kept underground for the entirety of the 36 years that they were missing. The revelation was shocking, not only because of the duration, but also because of the meticulous planning involved. News of the discovery spread far beyond the town. National media covered the story extensively, highlighting the decades-long mystery and the emotional impact on the family and community. Experts in criminal investigations weighed in, discussing how modern technology and persistent determination had finally brought clarity to a case that had long seemed unsolvable. The story resonated with people across the country, reminding everyone of the power of patience, dedication, and hope. For Tom Miller, the discovery reinforced the importance of never giving up. He spoke publicly about the experience, emphasizing how crucial it was to follow every lead, trust instincts, and remain persistent even when the odds seemed insurmountable. His words inspired countless others who had lost loved ones or were facing their own long-term struggles, showing that hope could endure, even over decades. As authorities prepared to recover the remains, the town organized a series of memorial services. People from all walks of life attended, lighting candles and sharing memories. The events were deeply emotional, blending grief with a sense of closure that had been impossible for more than 36 years. Stories about the Millers, kindness, generosity, and warmth were shared, keeping their memory alive and celebrating the impact they had made in the lives of others. The discovery also sparked renewed attention to other long-term missing person cases. Investigators were inspired to apply the same careful methods, technology, and persistence to cases that had gone cold. The lessons learned from the Miller family case became a model for combining community support, modern tools, and relentless determination in solving mysteries that might have otherwise remained unsolved. As the excavation concluded and the remains were respectfully recovered, the town reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The search had been long, painful, and filled with uncertainty, but it had ultimately revealed the truth. For Tom Miller and the rest of the family, it was a moment of closure that allowed them to honor the memory of their loved ones, while finally understanding what had happened on that fateful autumn day. Though the discovery was tragic, it marked the end of an era of unanswered questions. The Miller family would no longer exist as a mysterious absence, but as a remembered presence, honored for the lives they had lived and the love they had shared. The story of their disappearance and the decades-long search became a testament to human perseverance, the importance of hope, and the unyielding determination of those who refuse to forget. After the shocking discovery of the Miller family underground, the town slowly began to process the emotions that had been building for decades. Relief, grief, disbelief, and closure all mixed together in a complicated swirl. For Tom Miller, who had spent most of his adult life searching for answers, it was a moment unlike any other. He felt the weight of 36 years of uncertainty finally lift, though the pain of losing his brother, sister-in-law, and young niece and nephew remained deep in his heart. Every memory he had cherished over the years, from childhood visits to small adventures with the family, now came with the bittersweet knowledge of the family's fate. The community came together in ways that reflected the deep bond they shared with the Millers. People brought flowers, lit candles, and left notes at the memorial site near the excavation. The story of the family's disappearance and eventual discovery touched everyone, even those who had moved away from the town or were only children when the Millers vanished. Local schools organized lessons about the family, teaching children about kindness, hope, and the importance of remembering those who had been lost. The memory of Mark, Linda, Emily, and Ryan became a living part of the town's history, inspiring compassion and awareness in every new generation. As the remains were carefully recovered and prepared for proper burial, forensic experts continued to analyze the evidence. They studied the underground space and the surrounding area, uncovering details that helped explain how the Millers had been taken and hidden so meticulously. The investigation also revealed clues about the individuals responsible, their planning, and the circumstances that had allowed the family to remain hidden for so long. While many questions had been answered, investigators knew there were still lessons to be learned from this case that could prevent similar tragedies in the future. For Tom, the recovery of the remains brought a mixture of grief and relief. He finally knew what had happened to his brother and his family, but the reality of their loss was profound. He spent hours sitting quietly at the site, remembering the small moments of joy he had shared with Mark, Linda, Emily, and Ryan. He recalled family picnics, laughter echoing through the woods, and quiet evenings spent talking about dreams and plans. These memories, once tinged with uncertainty, were now framed by understanding, giving him a chance to grieve properly and honor their memory. The town organized a series of memorial services that allowed friends, neighbors, and relatives to come together to honor the Millers. People shared stories about their kindness, their warmth, and the way they had touched the lives of everyone around them. Children spoke about the games Emily and Ryan had played, while adults remembered Mark and Linda as pillars of the community who had always been generous with their time and care. These gatherings were emotional but also healing, providing the community with a space to mourn, celebrate, and finally say goodbye. Tom took on the responsibility of ensuring that the family was remembered in a way that reflected their lives, not just their tragic end. He worked with local historians and town leaders to create a permanent memorial that included photographs, letters, and personal items from the Millers' lives. The memorial told the story of their love, laughter, and dedication to each other, offering a space where people could reflect on the family's legacy and the lessons their disappearance had taught the community. The discovery of the Millers also inspired other families and communities dealing with missing loved ones. News of the excavation and the careful work done by authorities spread across the country. People learned about the importance of persistence, hope, and the use of modern technology in solving long-standing mysteries. Tom's dedication became a symbol of determination, showing that even after decades, it was possible to find answers and achieve closure. His story encouraged others to continue searching, to never give up hope, and to trust in the process of investigation and discovery. Counselors and psychologists were brought in to help the community cope with the emotional impact of the discovery. Many people who had grown up hearing about the Millers, or who had been children at the time of the disappearance, struggled to process the news. The recovery allowed them to face their fears and grief, turning decades of uncertainty into a clearer understanding of the truth. Families, in particular, were able to reflect on their own bonds, appreciating their loved ones in ways that had been difficult when confronted with the uncertainty surrounding the Millers' fate. Authorities continued their investigation into the circumstances surrounding the disappearance, using both old evidence and new findings to build a clearer picture of what had happened. The meticulous work provided insights into human behavior, criminal patterns, and the importance of community awareness. While some details were painful and difficult to confront, the investigation ultimately brought justice closer, helping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The discovery emphasized that no case should ever be considered truly closed, and that persistence and care can lead to resolution even after many years. The story of the Miller family also became a source of education and awareness. Community groups held seminars and discussions about safety, missing persons, and the importance of vigilance. Schools incorporated lessons on empathy, resilience, and the value of helping others. The narrative of the family, once a mystery and a source of fear, was transformed into a story of hope, unity, and the importance of never forgetting those who are lost. It reminded people that while tragedy can strike unexpectedly, compassion, dedication, and community support can create a meaningful impact. Tom's journey, in particular, became a symbol of enduring hope. He spoke at local events and in interviews about the importance of never giving up, even when circumstances seem hopeless. He shared how careful observation, perseverance, and a willingness to follow every lead had finally uncovered the truth about the Millers. His words resonated with people who had lost loved ones, faced challenges, or felt overwhelmed by the passage of time. Tom's dedication became a living example of the power of persistence and love, showing that one person's commitment can make a difference even after decades of uncertainty. As the memorials continued, the town found ways to celebrate the lives of Mark, Linda, Emily, and Ryan. Annual gatherings were organized, including small ceremonies, storytelling sessions, and community events that honored the family's memory. These gatherings allowed new generations to learn about the Millers, to understand their values, and to appreciate the importance of community, love, and kindness. The family's story became a part of the town's identity, reminding everyone of the fragile nature of life and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Over time, the discovery of the Millers also led to improvements in how missing person cases were handled in the region. Authorities adopted new techniques for searching remote areas, using technology to examine sites that had previously been considered inaccessible. Communication networks were strengthened to ensure that tips and leads could be followed more efficiently. The lessons learned from the Miller case helped create a system that would benefit countless families in the future, ensuring that no disappearance would go unnoticed or unresolved for decades. For Tom, the journey did not end with the discovery. He continued to advocate for families of missing persons, offering guidance, support, and encouragement to those facing uncertainty. His experience taught him that grief, hope, and perseverance are interconnected, and that even in the darkest moments, there is always the potential for answers. By sharing his story, he not only honored the memory of his brother and his family, but also created a lasting legacy of care, compassion, and dedication to others in need. The emotional impact of the discovery extended beyond Tom and the town. Media coverage, interviews, and documentaries allowed people across the country to witness the story, inspiring empathy and reflection. Viewers were reminded of the fragility of life, the importance of family, and the value of persistence in the face of uncertainty. The story became more than just a mystery. It was a lesson about the human capacity for hope, resilience, and love that endures even after decades of loss. As the community continued to heal, the focus shifted to honoring the lives that had been lost rather than the tragedy itself. Photographs, letters, and memories were preserved in local museums and archives. Storytelling events allowed people to share their experiences and reflections, creating a living memory of the Millers that could be passed down to future generations. Through these efforts, the family's legacy was secured, not as a story of disappearance, but as a testament to the enduring power of love, memory, and community. In the quiet moments after the memorials and ceremonies, Tom often visited the site where the Millers had been discovered. He would sit silently, reflecting on the journey, the years of searching, and the love that had motivated him every step of the way. Though the pain of loss remained, it was now accompanied by a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had found the truth, honored the memory of his family, and created a legacy that would inspire countless others. The story of the Miller family, from their disappearance on a crisp autumn drive to their discovery 36 years later, became a powerful reminder of the human capacity for resilience, hope, and love. It showed that even in the face of overwhelming uncertainty, perseverance and dedication can uncover the truth and provide closure. The town, the family, and everyone touched by this story learned that while tragedy may strike unexpectedly, the bonds of love and the strength of community can endure forever. Finally, the Miller family was remembered not just as victims of a tragic disappearance, but as a symbol of hope, kindness, and the enduring human spirit. Their story continues to inspire, educate, and remind the world that even after decades of uncertainty, truth and love have the power to prevail. And for Tom Miller, the journey, though filled with pain, became a testament to the power of hope and the importance of never giving up, a lesson that would resonate for generations to come.